Live from our Lakeview studio in the Windy City, this is Chicago Python, WebDev slash DevOps SIG. My name is Ali Sivji. I'm one of the ChiPy organizers. I'm going to be your host for tonight's event. Let's get started. Welcome everybody. Before I do start, I want to make everybody aware of our code of conduct. Sort of the gist of it is be respectful of other people, treat other people the way you want to be treated. More information about this is on our website. What is ChiPy? ChiPy, or the Chicago Python Users Group, is a Python-focused community that was started back in 2003. We're one of the OG Python communities. We've grown from our humble beginnings to become one of the largest Python communities in the world. We have almost 6,000 members. On top of our monthly meeting, which we call the Dunder main meeting, that happens on the second Thursday of every month, we have special interest groups that focus in on more specialized applications of Python. Since Chicago is one of the finance hubs, we have the Finance SIG. We also have a Data SIG. This event is the WebDev slash DevOps SIG. And we also have an Algorithms and Data Structure special interest group. I want to make everybody aware of our upcoming events. On Thursday, which I believe is 2 days from now, we're going to have our next Algorithms special interest group event. So go on Meetup to find out more details for that. And then on August 13th, it's going to be our August main meeting. And we have 3 fantastic talks. Nina Zakharenko, who is one of the PSF board of directors. She's a developer advocate at Microsoft. She gave the closing keynote at PyCon last year. She's going to be giving a talk. And we also have Piper Thernstrom, who is the creator and maintainer of Pursued PyBear, which is a Python game development library. So both of those folks are going to be on that live stream. So check out our Meetup page, RSVP. It's going to be a fantastic event. So what else is going on in the world? We just released a new feature to the Chicago Python chippy.org website. We created a job board. Since our inception in 2003, there have been countless number of Pythonistas that have been networking and finding job opportunities through the Chicago Python Users Group. We thought we'd make this process a little bit easier for both job seekers and employers. So we created a platform on our website where you can go in. If you have jobs available, please post them, and they're going to be listed on that page. Do want to give a shout out to the ChiPy Web Guild, especially Sopan, I believe, Mien, for all of their outstanding work in getting this feature out. We also have a new mentorship site. So if you go to chippymentor.org, we created a new app. Those of you who've been around ChiPy for a while know we have that mentorship program, which I sort of deem the world famous mentorship program. We sort of had to sort of change that up a bit with how things have been progressing. And we've sort of pivoted to a different type of mentorship model. This is more of a self-directed route. So if you go to chippymentor.org, you can fill out your profile, talk about what skills you have, what skills you're looking to acquire, and reach out to folks and build out more of a self-directed mentorship journey. That's pretty much it for announcements. Let's get to tonight's talks. We have 3 fantastic speakers. The first speaker is Tim Zabel. He's going to be talking about TeleIRC v2.0 release story. Next up is Kevin Nasto. You might know him as the ChiPy AlgoSig organizer. Kevin's going to be talking about Repo Cleaner, the BFG Repo Cleaner. And finally, we have Diana Rodriguez talking about Flask and how much of a microframework it really is. I do want to make everybody aware we have live stream questions can be asked to our speakers in our Q&A spot. So if you look to my right, I believe, is how the aspect is going to be. You see this this chat window. You can sort of ask your questions there. If you do have questions for the speakers, I just want to make everybody aware there's a little bit of a delay. So try to get them in a little bit early so we can get them answered during the Q&A period. Where can you find us? Chicago Python has a very active Slack community. If you go to this URL, you could send yourself an invite. I believe there's around 2,000 folks, and we're talking about things that are happening in Python in Chicago, as well as Python around the world. We also have a Twitter. If you go to @ChicagoPython, you can find out about upcoming events, sort of find out what we're up to. And all this information, plus more, plus our job board is on ChiPy.org. Well, that's it for announcements. Let me get Tim on the live stream. Hey, Tim, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good. Welcome. Where are you calling in from?
So I'm calling in from outside of Philadelphia.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Can you please introduce yourself to our community?
Sure. So my name is Tim Zabel, and I'm an upcoming senior at the Rochester Institute of Technology, where I study computer security. I've been focusing on DevOps for about 2 years now, mostly in the automation space with containers and container orchestration. These days, I'm involved a lot in the open source world, most notably in the Fedora Project, where I'm a loose contributor to the community operations team, and I'm also a member of the Free and Open Source Initiative at RIT.
Awesome. So I know your talk is not about Python, but we are a Python meetup. So we won't ask our second question, which is like how you got into Python. But can you tell us like how did you get into programming?
Sure. So I actually came to my university about 4 years ago with literally no knowledge of any programming at all. And so my first contact with programming was with Python as a freshman in my introductory CS 101 course. And just kind of getting a loose feeling of how programming works and getting a good idea and good grasp of Python kind of really opened up my world of how programming can really be a tool to change how we do things.
Yeah, definitely. And I really love the simplicity and just the simple way that Python reads. You can do so much complex stuff with like a few lines of readable code. So do you have, is Python your favorite language? Do you have another language that you would call your favorite?
Yeah, so I would say Python is definitely my most comfortable language. It's definitely the most simple and easy to work for. If I need a proof of concept, Python is definitely the way to go for me. In terms of my current favorite language, I would definitely say Go is my current favorite. It's quite a bit different from Python, but at the same time, very similar. And it's really neat to work with that language.
Yeah, I find a lot of shops in Chicago that were Python shops. If they need performance, they're moving over to that Go stack. We were talking a little bit earlier about how you're sort of going to be doing the next semester from home, and all our audience has been dealing with the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Chicago has opened up a little bit, so we are able to see friends and socialize a bit more, but it's not really what it used to. Do you mind talking and sharing your experience about like how you've dealt with COVID-19 and the pandemic?
Yeah, sure. So, like most people, around March is when, at least in the U.S., that's when things really started to lock down a bit. And so I was up at school doing my semester, and then our spring break happened, and we were forced to go remotely. And so I decided to go back to my home where I live outside of Philadelphia, and it's honestly been pretty nice because I've been able to be with my family, and generally I don't get to spend more than a couple weeks out of the year to be with them. So if there's any sort of silver lining, it's that I've been able to be with my family for this extended amount of time. So that's been pretty nice, at least.
Yeah, I've heard that story a lot, like families coming together. Yeah, it's always great to see. So I think that's it for the question period. Are you ready to get started with your talk?
Sure. I will go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. Should be in order there.
Yeah. Tim, please take it away.
Alrighty, sure. So my talk tonight is about TeleIRC, and our road from Node.js to where we currently are at Go. And so it's kind of going to go over the project management aspect of how the project started and how we kind of got a development method situated to really get what we want done. And so you can find me on GitHub at TJ Zabel or on Twitter every once in a while at TJ Zabel21. And so I want to kind of give a little bit of a background of what TeleIRC is. And so it was started by a group of students at RIT, and namely it is a Telegram to IRC bridge, which is currently written in Go. And it was created for the RIT Linux users group, since we currently have both Telegram groups and our traditional IRC groups, where we have many different channels and many different communities who are communicating with each other. And this bridge was written to link these two communities together who would otherwise be disconnected. And with IRC being notoriously text-based, it can be really hard for a new contributor or someone who is not in the tech space to kind of get in touch with a lot of organizations, since IRC is, at least in the open source space, traditionally text-based, and they use IRC for their communications. And so with the original students who wrote TeleIRC, they eventually graduated from RIT and became alumni and had their own lives and jobs. And so development kind of became a little stagnant, but the project was still heavily used within RIT and within these organizations. And so around the same time, the Fedora Project was also looking for a way to improve their own community engagement. And they use IRC as their de facto method of communicating across all of their different groups and their different platforms. And so Telegram started to become a tool to be used as well. It's much simpler to be used, and a lot of people are familiar with it, with its traditional SMS-based view, and it's on mobile. And so TeleIRC became used throughout all of the Fedora project. And with that, it no longer became just a club project. And so with these added users, there became a lot of additional feature requests of things that people wanted, such as quality of life fixes, bug fixes. And with this large influx of new users and new issues that we had to figure out how we actually wanted to meet these demands. And so with that in came project management. We started off as a club project with just developing whatever we wanted to do at the time, but we can't really do that anymore. So we need to figure out a way that we can manage our project without being overwhelmed with all these new things that we have. And so when we get new issues in, we need to figure out, is this important? What do we actually need to do? And so at this time, a lot of our main contributors are college students, and they have their own classes, they have their own lives. And so how do we work around this while still being able to deliver these features and things that our users want? And so in comes our sort of agile method of how we go about our traditional development flow. And so here you can see our Kanban board. And so we have our traditional method of a backlog. Things that we don't directly have control over is our waiting on external. And then we get into our sprints, which are traditionally about 2 weeks to 3 weeks at a time. And so you can see our current sprint, things that we want to do in this short time frame. We have what we're currently actually working on. And then we also have things that we want to put on a wish list for what we think might be good to start working on in the next sprint, in the next couple of weeks. And so with that, we really wanted to harp on the idea that we have really changing lives, and we, as students, get a lot of our own projects that we have to do for our classes. And so we need to be able to have actionable items that we can realistically do within these 2 to 3 week time frames. And so in order to solve that, we really figured out that short sprints were a really good idea, And having anything longer than 2 weeks became really unrealistic for being able to view what we could reasonably complete in a longer time frame. And so any new issues that we have that come in, we need to really make sure that each issue is fully actionable and has a direct impact on our users. So any big issues that we get, we really want to break them up into small pieces that can be really done in chunks. And also, we don't really work on too many hard due dates because everyone's lives are constantly changing. And so we use our short sprints to really bring together our lives and the features that we want to do. And a 2-week time frame, these short, small issues are really good for getting a pretty good estimate as to how much and how quickly we can actually get certain things done. And so when we actually come to the task of creating a 2-week sprint, we need to figure out what is actually immediately useful to our users. We need to kind of balance the time available that we have versus the length of how many issues we want to get in. And with that, we want to make sure that every issue that we have in our current sprint should be assigned a specific owner to be worked with. Because if you don't have an owner with an issue that is directly in the sprint that you're working with, that kind of means that your sprint is a little bit too big, and you can't really guarantee that an issue is going to be worked on if you don't immediately have an owner at the start of the sprint. And so now that we kind of had a method for going about our development, we pretty much had a stable project at this point. We had a stable influx of users, and we had our issues and our project boards. And we really wanted to kind of see how can we change what we are doing? How can we make our project better? And so we decided to move off of our original code base of Node.js to Go. And we really wanted to kind of fix what we did in our first iteration and build container first and make things a lot more lightweight and speed up our startup time of our application. And it was also just a new challenge. Go is used heavily throughout many projects today, and even our maintainers wanted to have more of a challenge and try to see if Go could be a good fit for our own project. And so this kind of came into what are the really big differences between Node.js and Go. We have this mature project, so why don't we just stay on this language and just iterate from there? And our main thinking was that Go has pretty good static typing and also compiles directly to a binary. And Go also meant a lot of new contributors for us. So at this time, Node.js was working very well for us, but we didn't really have too many active contributors on a week-to-week basis. But there were quite a good number of users who really enjoyed the Go language and who have suggested interest in working with Go in the past. And so we decided to try to see if Go could be a good direction for us. And this ended up giving us a lot new active contributors. And so when switching to a whole separate language in a software project, there were a lot of challenges that we had to figure out in order to actively and efficiently make this change. So did we make a whole new repo? Did we, how did we exactly do this? And also, what made a minimum viable product? And so what we ended up doing was creating a whole new branch and working off entirely on that, while keeping the Node.js version for our new users who wanted something stable at the time. And so our early goals for the project was to really avoid all the pitfalls that we had from the previous iteration. Our Node.js version went through a lot of rewrites, and it was kind of a bigger code base that we originally wanted. And from the start, we wanted unit testing to be an integral part of the project, because unit tests are really how we are able to make sure that things work as they are intended, so that way when we ship a release, we know that things are going to be working. And the hardest thing, at least for me, was transparency. Switching to Go was a really big change, and we wanted to immediately let our community know that this is something that we were working on, and we didn't want to exactly hide that this is going on. And we also didn't want to cut corners, because with a whole new iteration of our project, we wanted it to get it done right and get done right the first time. And also with this change, we wanted full feature parity with the Node.js to the Go releases. And in order to really do that, we figured out that beta releases were a really good way to get early adopters into our project who wanted to help test out the Go releases before we actually made a stable release. And we were actually really surprised that when we started doing beta releases, we actually got a lot of external users who were submitting issues for things that were bugs or things that could be done a little bit better. And we were really actually very surprised that we got these additional users who weren't there when we had the Node.js version. And so this gave a lot of community engagement as we were currently writing our new release and working with a new language. It was really good to kind of get our community engaged with how we were actually working on this. And so our present day, we started working with the change from Node.js to Go around the summer of last year. And we really started the actual development process in the early fall. And at around March to April, we were able to get the entire Go release with almost full feature parity out the door. And we've been really pleased with how it all went. The only thing is we're just missing picture support from Telegram to IRC. And so what retrospective do we have for doing this whole rewrite? Was it worth it in the end? So no matter the size of a project, a full rewrite is really hard to do. And switching to a statically typed language offers a lot of different challenges, and there were a lot of different things that we had to do to make sure that everything was typed exactly the way that we wanted it to be. And one of the downsides of doing this change was that our users who were using the Node.js versions, they had to go a long time without any major updates. And it became a challenge that when we were going and getting issues for the Node.js version, we really had to decide, do we stop what we're doing and fix these issues, or do we just work them into the Go port and let our users know that, like, sadly, these issues won't be fixed for quite a while. And also we found out that long-term deadlines are really a fantasy. If you're trying to get a release out in 6 months, that's almost impossible to accurately judge and accurately get that done in that exact time frame. And so I can hopefully say that we did not hit any of our deadlines. And so that's the end of my presentation. I want to kind of point out a few links for anyone who wanted to look at our project or anything like that. So you can find us on GitHub at ritlug/TeleIRC. And on Telegram, we are t.me/TeleIRC. You can also find us on IRC, and also the RIT Linux Users Group website and the Free and Open Source Initiative at RIT are also listed there. Thank you.
Thanks so
Are there
much.
any questions?
Can we please give Tim a round of applause in the chat? That was fantastic. It's so great to see like Agile being used for like a project like this. So we did have a question coming in. This is my buddy Boyan from Serbia. He's asking, are you using Telegram bots to build the interface for the IRC bridge?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting how it really works. We have two opposing sides. We have the IRC side of the bridge and the Telegram side of the bridge. And so when a message comes in on Telegram, we need to get that over to IRC. So what we actually do is when we're ready to send the message, we call the IRC bot from the Telegram side to take our message and send it over, and vice versa for the other side. So yes, we actually have one bot for IRC and one bot for Telegram, and TeleIRC bridges these two together. It makes it really easy for you to communicate across platform.
Okay, awesome. And I think related to that is, are you using the Telegram pull function for any part of the bridge?
Yes, we actually have an issue out for this. Currently, we do not have that functionality, but if you go to our GitHub, we actually do have an issue for Telegram polling, because it is a feature that we sometimes see in some of our communities. But no, we currently do not have that feature out.
Okay, cool. And I actually was curious a little bit about the testing. So you mentioned unit tests are very important. When you're migrating from like one language to another, like what's the like how are you starting to think about like are you migrating your test first? Can you talk a little bit about like that kind of workflow?
Yeah, sure. So the migration aspect is really challenging, and how do you actually determine like what is minimally viable? And with the pure differences between the languages, it's really hard to figure out exactly how to go about it. So the way we did it, and I don't know if this was the best route, but it's what worked for us, is we first got our minimum viable thing. We wanted to see that we have a message on Telegram and it goes to IRC. Once we had that, we stopped adding any features and went in and created unit tests for just those little pieces. So that way we knew we had a working bridge, and then we want to test that it's working the way we want to, and then we expand from there.
Yeah, I definitely think like that's like sort of like when you're building something for the first time, like test-driven development, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit controversial, like is not the best way forward. It's all about like test after might be a better way.
It's definitely a discussion about whether or not building a test first or building the actual feature first is better or worse. And I mean, definitely when you're creating tests, you do end up changing the original feature code that you wrote. So it's kind of, they work really well hand in hand.
So when you say unit, like how do you define a unit?
So it's actually quite easy on the, for our project itself, because we have like specific handlers for messages or photos or documents that are being sent. So we already have these really defined units of our code. And so it's really easy to just test if someone uploads a document, like how we handle that. So for us, it was actually quite simple to isolate these specific sections of our code and really test those pretty well.
Awesome. And would you say that like you're doing a little bit more integration testing, or is it more like unit testing?
So currently we only have unit tests. Getting an integration test for us requires a pretty big challenge of starting up our own bots and then having bots send messages over. And for us, an integration test wasn't quite worth it. And having those unit tests, it fixes 95% of, or it catches about 95% of any issues we would have. And then the remaining 5%, we locally spin up and test out the bridge ourselves. And for us, that's worked really well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, we've been building out like a Slack bot at ChiPy, and one of the sort of the ways that like I've been finding testing would be like I mock out that boundary with like some sort of like request framework that records all my requests and responses and sort of just plays it back. It hides like the keys and stuff. So like I call that my integration test, but like it really depends on like how you're looking at it. But yeah, this was fascinating. Before we let you go, do you have any words of wisdoms or calls to action for our community?
I don't know if I can think of anything. Just that kind of, at least from the open source aspect, it's a really big world out there, and I really encourage someone to try something new and get involved with a new project, because you really never know where it's going to end up.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Can we get Tim another round of applause in the chat? Thanks so much, Tim, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right, so that was Tim Zabel talking about how the TeleIRC project migrated from Node.js to Go. I know it's not a Python story, but these kinds of things are definitely applicable across all sorts of languages. That's one of the best things about software engineering. Next up, we have Kevin Nasto. I'm going to bring him on. Welcome, Kevin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Where are you calling in from?
Calling in from Chicago right now. Yep.
Calling in from the best city in the world. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. So my name is Kevin Nasto. I'm working right now for a consulting company, Nerdery, and I help organize the algorithm specialist interest group. So come out and join us on Thursday if you want to practice interview skills and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Links on our meetup page. Check that out. Can you please talk a little bit about how you first got into Python?
Sure. So I started as a computer engineer and got a job doing Perl development because it was something that was there was a lot of roles when I was coming out of college for that. And then we started turning all our Perl code into Python and started getting into Python.
I mean, Perl is I guess it's the grandfather of Python. Oh, do you miss working in Perl?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. Yeah, you don't really hear a lot of folks say they do. But like folks in our community, as I'm sure you know, just being one of the organizers, it's like it's the turnout for our events hasn't been the same. Like things have been a little different. People are a little down. Can you talk a little bit about how you're dealing with the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to get our events live for the Algo SIG. For myself personally, just hanging in there, girlfriend, family, doing a lot of Zoom, exercise, coding, of course, staying occupied.
Yeah.
So.
Are you getting those miles in?
Yeah, still running.
Awesome.
So
fantastic. All right, cool. Are you ready to get started with your talk?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. All right, I see you got your screen shared. Kevin, please take it away.
All right, so going to be talking about BFG Repo Cleaner. Anybody who doesn't know what that is, well, this is we're going to go over it. So what use it? Well, I'm sure that we've been into a situation where we've accidentally put a password into our code base, a big file, maybe like a video that's like 10 gigabytes. Well, I guess that probably will get rejected, but maybe something smaller that'll slow things down, maybe some kind of client secret. Well, you can, of course, delete that file, remove that password, but Git is a permanent record and everything is in the history. So if you do have a sensitive password or something that you can't change, maybe, for example, I put in an email address accidentally, a personal email address, and just my personal email address. I wanted to remove it. Or, for example, a zip file, all those are stored in your history. Like if you keep committing a zip file, a SQL file, they'll just add up and pretty soon your repo will be like 100 megabytes. So you need to get rid of that. And a way to do it is using a BFG. So one command here is we're gonna jump right into it, is gonna be delete files, -- delete files. So you put in the file name and your repo folder. And in this case, we're credit cards.sql, obviously this would be a pretty big accident to accidentally put credit cards in GitHub. So hopefully you won't do that. But this is how you, for example, delete that. So another usage is going to be the -- replace text, and this is going to replace your password text with **. They have some kind of default, string. And the way this thing is actually it's a file that you have to specify. So you're not actually, they don't want you to put your password text in the command line. So you actually have to make a file. And in that file, as you can see in the slide, is you have just a line and then your password in each line. So first password is password123. Obviously bad password, don't use that. And then your next password is blah, blah, blah. And what that will do is it will find and replace in all your Git, every branch, everything, and it will replace those strings of text. Of course, you can only have one in there. If you have one password, you can have more. That file name can be anything. And that's the syntax right there. So that was that. Watch out. One thing to keep in mind is that it does not modify your latest commit. This is a safety feature. So your latest files that you have will not actually modify. It will modify your history, just your history. So what you want to do first is get rid of it from your most recent commit, and then you want to run BFG to cleanse the history. So of course, you can actually override this behavior if you just go for it. You don't want to bother with the safety feature. You just want to boom, just override everything. You can use the no blob protection option, which will also do your current files. Alternatives to BFG, well, there is git filter branch, which is the traditional approach. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of words here, a lot of text. You don't know what's going on because it's just all this stuff, and better to have a wrapper around, do it slightly different. And actually, BFG is actually faster than filter branch as well. And this is just for deleting a file. It's a little bit more complicated to remove password. So full instructions with BFG. You install it. You're going to do a backup, clone. You don't want to accidentally delete something that you actually need. Do it yourself first on the most recent commits. Run the BFG commands. You're going to push, do a force push. Sometimes I've had issues with that. So you can do a force push if you have issues. Don't use your old copy anymore. Tell people, hey, grab the new repo now. It's been cleaned up, the new files. Don't use the old one because that may merge back in the files that you don't want. So the BFG output is basically when you type in the commands, you get something like this. BFG run is complete. And then it wants you to run one more git command, which will delete the files from your actual directory. So we're going to go into the, actually this slide was supposed to be one slide later, so installation. So installing it on a Mac is pretty easy. You're just going to do brew install BFG. On Windows, you have to actually go onto oracle.com, go to the .xc, find the .xc file, download it, and it is a Java file. So on Windows, you're going to have to do java-jar and then bfg.jar, which is the download file that you get from the BFG website. So the full command is you're going to do git clone, and then you're going to do the java-jar if you're on Windows, and -- delete files, your file name you're going to delete, and you are one directory above your repo. That's why you specify the repo name in there. And then after you're done, you're gonna get this screen, and it's gonna say, when ready, run this command. You're gonna run that command to delete the files from your local, and then git push force. I think the force will make sure that you don't have merge conflicts, but git push will actually also work most of the time. So long story short, messed up your git, use BFG. So that's BFG Repo Cleaner for you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin. Can we please give Kevin a round of applause in the chat? I'm throwing mine in. That was great. We did have some questions coming in, but if you do have questions, I think I forgot to mention last time, ask them in the chat. We'll get our speakers to answer them as they come in. So we did have a question. How do you handle when everybody else's history has changed? Oh, sorry, as everybody else's history no longer matches master now that you've changed your history? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so it is a problem. You have to tell everybody, hey, I'm running BFG. Everybody throw away, download the repo again. And if you have any commits, you're going to have to manually put them in. If you don't fix that, and if you don't tell anybody and somebody's pushing, what's going to happen is it's going to reintroduce the other branches back in, and you'll still have them there. So, so yeah, that's the answer to that question.
I just jumped off the stream for a sec. Sorry about that. I don't know how to use my mouse properly. So I actually did have a question. Like, I'm sort of curious. What caused you to use BFG? Because I'm sure there's a story there somewhere.
Well, I've actually had to use it a few times now. The first time is I accidentally, my GitHub got hacked actually somehow. Long story, but yeah, I've used a secure password, two-factor, all that. And second story is that I just was committing a bunch of zip files into my Git for a long time, and they added up, and then it turned into like 100 megabytes. So
yeah. It tends to do that after a while. Yeah, I know. Like sometimes, like it's fun playing code archaeology when you're like digging through, like, why does this one person have like 3 million lines committed, and then you see they like committed a zip file or committed like a CSV file, they just sort of like undo it somehow. Oh, but yeah, I sort of had like another piece of advice. Like if you commit a password to Git, just change that password. That's going to be like a lot easier. Like it just trying to change history. Like I'm sure there's like, but yeah, that's just sort of my out there. And let's see. Boyan asks, is the acronym a Doom reference? We're just gonna ignore that and just say yeah. But before we do let you go, do you have any words of wisdom or calls to action for our community?
Yeah, I mean, just hang in there. A good time to get some more practice in with your coding. Come to the Algo SIG.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna be pitching the Algo SIG. If you have not gone to the Algo SIG, you gotta go. Like, it's fantastic experience getting practice doing those kinds of questions you never really see at work. But so for some reason, you have to do them for getting a job. But yeah, that's neither here or there.
That's
all right,
true.
cool. Thanks so much, Kevin. We'll see you around. All right, so that was Kevin Nasto talking about the BFG Repo Cleaner. Before that, we had Tim Zabel talking about how they converted TeleIRC bot from Node.js to Go. We're actually going to take a break before we have our next speaker come up. So just join us right now. It's 6:41, so let's start back at 6:45. So we'll see you in 4 minutes. All right, and we're back with the Chicago Python WebDev slash DevOps SIG. My name is Ali Sivji. I'm one of the organizers of Chicago Python. I'm your host for tonight's event. Before the break, we had two fantastic talks. One about a really story from a migration story from Node.js to Go. A lot of those lessons can be applied to something like Python 2 to Python 3. I think some of us are still in that migration phase. Not going to say any names. It might be me. And also we had a talk about the BFG Repo Cleaner. Next up, we have Diana Rodriguez talking about my favorite framework. Welcome to I was going to say podcast. Welcome to our live stream, Diana.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, where are you calling in from?
I am in Durham, North Carolina. We just had a horrible storm as the hurricane Isaias was in the area.
Yeah.
Just last night.
Are y'all doing okay? Is everybody okay on your side?
Yeah, there's a lot of damage, trees and power outages from last night. I was lucky to not suffer any of those incidents. Thank goodness.
That's good to hear. We're actually our second speaker from that triangle area, so it's awesome to have you. Fantastic. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Definitely. So my name is Diana Rodriguez, and I'm a Python developer advocate at Vonage. I am a big fan of microframeworks and anything that gives me enough freedom. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Flask.
Awesome. Can you talk about how you first got into Python?
Yeah, that was like in 1994. I was 12 years old and Python was very popular, but it wasn't like the biggest hit yet where I lived. I was in South America, in Venezuela. And I used to do homework for computer science students. They paid me for that. And I know, right? So
Yeah.
at the age of 12, I've always been I've always been a nerd and I love it, So I was introduced by them, by these students. They said, well, we need you to learn this and we need you to help us because we can't pass. And I'm like, all right, you give me money, I'll do it. So I fell in love with it. So I started with assembler when I was 6 years old. If the story sounds weird, I have to give full disclosure. I'm in the autistic spectrum, and my parents were trying by all means to integrate me into society and also keep me quiet at the same time. I was a very hyper kid when I didn't have, things to fix. So this is how I came to computers and programming. It's the only thing I can do. I'm not a good cook, so I tell bad jokes.
I think a lot of us in the programming community are very lucky to be able to program because there's not a lot of things we can really do. I definitely fall in that boat myself. So you've been doing Python since '94. So what are some of your what's the feature you've enjoyed the most since that evolution of the language? Because it's been an incredible journey. It's grown to be the most popular language in the world.
Oh, well, it's pretty recent. Async, for example, async IO.
Mm-hmm.
I know I could talk about so many things. That the changes from the very first version and actually even migrating from 2 to 3, it's like 180 degrees now. I feel that Python has evolved to be friendly and readable for everyone. And I think it's a good way to start with programming if you're not familiar with any other language. I feel that community is also extremely supportive, and it has evolved in the same direction to make it as open and as friendly and as well documented as possible for anyone to learn. I think that would be the biggest win.
I love like that Brett Cannon saying is like, I came for the language and I stayed for the community. Like, I don't think there's any more truth about Python than that there. But speaking of community, a lot of folks in Chicago, and I'm sure like all around the world, have been dealing with sheltering in place and the effects of the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and how y'all have been coping with it?
I've been eating a lot, gaining weight, watching movies. And music keeps me going. I'm very used to traveling because of my work, and I feel like this. Well, not only did it impact me negatively because I actually had COVID-19 and gave it to my mom as well. So I was out of commission for 15 days, and it has lasting effects. It's like having a bad bronchitis, dengue fever, and a stomach flu at the same time.
Wow.
And thanks to that, I'm on 3 inhalers a day, and it's going to be like that long term. It's got long-term effects for me. I have type 1 diabetes as well, so it's one of those things that, like, if I can give any word of caution or advice to anyone, regardless of how the virus and the media have been managing things, seriously, it is true. It's not a joke. It's really bad, and it's extremely contagious. So if you can do anything to protect yourself and to not go through this horrible ordeal, if it means staying at home and being bored, I'd rather walk on, scratch the walls and suck it up, because I don't wish anyone being as sick as I was.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And like, that's definitely like great advice. It's like, stay at home, stay safe, wear masks. Like when things, like when we saw sort of like the news coming out at the start of March, like we started moving all our events, trying to look for online venues. And I think like these virtual events, like we've been fortunate enough to have our community attend, be able to bring in speakers from like all around the world. But yeah, it's like, stay safe. I think we're going to be doing this for like the next little while. But yeah, it must be especially hard being like a developer advocate and be like used to like traveling on airplanes every single week, being like in a different country, different city. It's yeah, it must be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, but well, at least we're closer with online events, and I personally feel grateful that I've managed to reach latitudes that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. I mean, there's only so much you can do. There's only so many places. There are only so many places you can go to in a set period of time. So it's been an experience. I even gave a talk for the Monrovia community. That's the capital of Liberia in Africa. I also had the opportunity to speak for a community in Swaziland. And, those things are not as doable under normal circumstances. So I feel that even if things go back to normal, we will keep the benefit of reaching out to corners never reached before through online meetings. Yeah,
definitely. Like right now, I believe PyCon Africa is on. I'm actually gonna give a shout out. I got my my PyCon shirt from I think PyCon 2018. So like I'm always, if people that are always watching, I'm always repping some PyCon stuff. So yeah, I love the community, and I'm really glad you're able to spread your knowledge across the world. Are you ready to get started with your talk?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Diana Rodriguez, please take it away.
Thank you. So, yeah, this is the name of my talk. The title of my talk is Flask, How Much of a Micro Framework? And I already introduced myself, but I love these Steven Universe fusions. So I'm Diana Rodriguez, and yeah, I'm a Google developer expert, and Out Zero ambassador, and Microsoft MVP, etc., etc. I'm a Python developer advocate at Vonage, but the most important part of this is that I'm someone who learns new things every single day, regardless of how much you study or how much you practice or how much you learn or how many years you've been in this industry, every day is a miraculous opportunity to learn something new. Needless to say that I love engaging with the community. My Twitter is @katufa82, and you can also check my website. It's superdie.dev. There's a little bit of everything, so don't have high expectations. Anyway, now that we know who am I, definitely who am I not. I'm sure you recognize this lady, and if not, this is the Oracle in the Matrix. I'm certainly not the Oracle. I don't know all the answers. I wish I did, but yeah, I don't know all the answers, and this is a collection of my own personal experiences and what I've seen in the last 20 years of work, or my day-to-day. I need to give you a warning, just so you're aware, that this talk is framework agnostic. Definitely, for as much as I love Flask with all my heart, and it's definitely my favorite framework, I am not trying to mob anyone into a cult or anything. I believe in the weapon of choice philosophy, so whatever tool that does a job and makes you happy is the right tool. So again, I'm not trying to start a framework war or try to mob anyone into a cult or a mob or anything. And this particular talk is full of what many people would consider obvious examples. And I've learned that it doesn't matter how long you've been doing this for, going back to the basics is important, and it keeps us grounded. So to give some context, I'm going to be comparing Flask to Django, and I have to bring it up, not because I want to start a framework war, but say, for example, Django is one of the most popular and common frameworks used in Python, and it's a full-fledged suite in comparison to Flask. So Django, definitely, it's a Python-based, free and open source web framework. It follows the model template view pattern, and it's really good for complex and database-driven websites. It's got a lot, everything. In the case of Flask, it's a Python microframework. It uses based in WebZug, Jinja 2 for templates, and the bestest intentions. And when I say the bestest intentions, I am biased, because I believe that the Flask team definitely had in mind those of us who need an option to build on top the bare minimum, and those of us who need a good structure, say for web applications or simple backends or RESTful apps, APIs, etc., in a simple way. So when I think of microframework, I think of how if I had to choose, or actually let's put it this way, we have the Avengers team, and I have to pick one member, and I guess I would pick Doctor Strange, right, versus the whole team. And I would say that maybe a framework like Python, like Django, sorry, would be something like the whole team. But in this case, I'm choosing Doctor Strange, right? If you're not into that analogy, then we have the simple architecture of a microframework. So we have our bare minimum, what we need for routing and logging, and we can build on top. And if this doesn't illustrate the idea, then we can think of a microframework as a set of building blocks. This would be what Flask is. If we compare it to the Django architecture, mind my horrible drawing, I would say it's more like the New Zealand All Blacks team the full battery, and it's amazing. If we want to start building with Flask, I like the best example to illustrate how simple and friendly Flask is. Oh, my other image didn't load, but it was a funny meme of having a full battery. It was like a 3D printed castle instead of the Lego blocks. There you go. But yeah, if we wanna talk about Flask, and if I had to sell this to people in less than 2 seconds, I would show a simple Hello World app. So the cool thing about Flask is that we can build a Hello World app in less than 10 lines and no complication. So you can see the beautiful syntax we're instantiating. We have the amazing route decorators, and this is a common pattern in Flask, and it's one of the reasons I love Flask for how readable the code is. And then for those who write APIs without frameworks, Flask also offers simplicity and performance. And in less than 10 lines, and I showed this at PyLadies, and I like to leave it like that. Hola, PyLadies. This is the result. So it's a great way to start with Python or with Python frameworks if you're already familiar with programming. And like every framework, we have pros and cons. So I would say the pros, the learning curve is not steep at all. It's very much readable, and that's something I stress. How important it is for all of us as developers to be able to read and understand code. Just to mention something out of subject. I had to do a code review. It was a React app, and it had like 15 levels of nested ternary operators. And to do a code review for something like that, I needed 3 days and a bottle of vodka, you know? So when we write code, it has to be human readable. But if we have a framework that offers those extra, you know, those extra flavors, like the right decorators, the way they're structured in Flask, then it's like a massive win. It makes our life easier. So anyway, yeah, learning curve is great. It's a production ready framework. We can actually run our server and test locally. The routing is beautiful. It supports sessions and cookies. It's extensible. I like the fact that there are no baked-in ORM and admin dashboards and authentication and everything, because you can choose exactly the libraries you need to use based on what you want to do. I also have to say that Flask has an excellent documentation. And then for the cons, there are none. No, I'm joking. It can be a bit complex for big apps. Maybe for some people, too many moving parts can consume a lot of development time. And this is something we have to, use wisely. How much freedom do we want, and how much can we take, and how much does this benefit our development process? Do we really need to develop things from scratch? That's where, your own judgment and your wisdom comes in. The community might be a bit small in comparison to Django, but yeah, so finding a solution for a problem can be a bit complicated. But then again, in the spirit of building community, this is a great opportunity to contribute and to add new solutions or add your findings and contribute to the community. So when someone else goes through the same thing, obviously they will find your solution. So the most common questions I get are these. Is Flask for small projects only? I would say not really, because in the world of Flask, there are 100, well, hundreds actually, of dependencies that will help us create robust and scalable web projects. So you want to connect to a database, you can implement the ORM of your choice, the one you like. Do you want to version your API? There's going to be a library for that. Do you want to integrate migrations and an interactive shell in your models? You can do that. There's a really good library for that. It's called Flask Manager. So for real, the community is very active in that aspect. And there are many things that are native to Django that you can find as dependencies for Flask. And if not, then there's a great opportunity there to create something new. Why is it called a microframework? Well, don't let that word fool you. It's basically a good name to illustrate the point that you just get the bare minimum, but you can build on top. And that's it, basically. You have all the freedom you need. And then, can it do everything Django does? Definitely, yes. Everything you do with Django, you can do it with Flask. Be certain about that. You can define routes, you can work with forms, you can render templates, you can send emails, you can define unit tests, everything and more. And whatever doesn't exist, you can create it. And also a common question would be, when should I use Flask instead of Django? Weapon of choice. I would say if you're working with microservices, if you are using it for IoT projects, I mean, you can easily run a Flask server in a Raspberry Pi. I mean, there are so many options, but definitely, yeah, Flask is a good choice if you're into minimalism or if you need the freedom to develop on top of the bare minimum you need to start. And now let's talk about full stack Flask. Is that even possible? It is. You can use Flask with the most popular front-end frameworks. I've done it. Flask and React, Flask and Angular, and I commend anyone who does it. Not because I have anything against Angular, but you know it's a very opinionated framework, and it reminds me a lot of Java. So it's an interesting choice, but it is definitely doable and possible. I've done it myself too. You can do Flask and Vue, and I have some examples in my repositories of what I've been doing lately, and something I like, Svelte and Flask. But let's go beyond this amazing sales pitch I'm doing about my favorite framework and see it in action. Excuse me. So I gave a talk at EuroPython recently about using tech for good. I have an application that I developed in Flask using materialized CSS as the CSS library, and you can see the repositories. It's called Nextmo Scouts. There's a GitHub repository, the link, and I'll give you some context. So I mentioned before that I have type 1 diabetes. I belong to the Faulty Pancreas Club, and if you want to head to this link, dianox.superdi.dev, you will see something like this. It's a web-based monitor. It's called Night Scout, and it's a web-based continuous glucose monitor. So you get those blood sugar levels in real time. It basically predicts values 30 minutes ahead using an autoregressive second-order model. This server reads from a MongoDB containing data from my sensor. I have a sensor that is plugged to my arm. It's inserted with a small needle, and now it leaves a cannula. It's right here. You can't see it, but you can see my blood sugar levels if you want. And then it generates alarms for high and low values. So in theory, yeah, I have data from my sensor, and then this goes to my phone, and I use my phone to bridge it to Night Scout, And then with that data, I have another app that I use a little bit of technology to summon my pump from those readings and from those predictions. I can summon my pump, my Omnipod in this case, and make better and informed decisions when I need to dose. But what happens? These devices, meaning readers or applications like the one I have in my phone, a Dexcom, and the other open source app, it's called Android apps. So I have two phones, not because I need them, but because I'm developing constantly on top of what's coming out for diabetes management. So yeah, these applications have alarms. But in moments of crisis, and especially when I'm asleep, it's difficult for me to hear them. But you know what? I always hear my phone, which is why I thought, well, I could probably try something that calls my number, that uses what I've been working on, that I can make in a simple framework and help other people and myself. So when you're asleep, it is especially dangerous, and this is why we need a lot of monitoring, because people tend to go low at night. For those who don't have a pump that is giving tiny little bits of rapid insulin, trying to emulate the way a normal pancreas works, those who are on multiple daily injections with insulin pens have to take two types of insulin: a long-acting insulin, a basal, and a rapid insulin that we use for food. What happens when you go to bed and maybe your body is tired, or you're stressed, or you're reacting to something? The way we absorb that insulin can be affected by that, and then boom, it happens. You're low. If you're asleep, sometimes you can't wake up, because if your blood sugars are low, you can die from that. Same if they're too high. And if you're asleep, sometimes it's difficult to wake up. A lot of people feel sick. A lot of people are not even aware, and they only realize when they're having seizures. So I decided to do this, and I thought, well, how do I do this? I'm going to use these values that are the high and low values for blood sugars, and I'm going to have something call my phone. So I'm using Vonage, the SMS and voice APIs, to notify myself and my emergency contacts of irregular situations with my blood sugars. And I'm going to grab the readings for the last 60 minutes or any given frequency, any given time frequency from that dashboard through a Python thread with a scheduler. So if ranges are below or higher than what is configured through environment variables, then it has to fire the alerts. And there's also an alert if it doesn't get data for a set period of time. And in this case, it will send a message to all the emergency contacts I specify that my dashboard is online, so there's no data on my blood sugar. And then I can use the second scheduler to obtain fresh data. And there it is, a simple Flask application that allows me to log in with Google Auth and configure my Night Scout details. In this case, Flask was amazing for me. Don't judge me, my design skills are not the best, and I needed something simple, right? So in here, I can configure the entries endpoint to grab my my blood glucose readings data, my phone number to receive a call if my levels are out of whack, an emergency contact, in this case, my mom, who will get notified if I don't pick up the phone, and up to 5 additional contacts who will be notified should either of them not pick up one by one. And let's have a quick run through on the technical details that made this app a great development experience. I'm not going to show a wall of code. Don't worry, it will be very brief. So for our views, Flask uses Jinja as a template engine. So it's pure HTML. We can add CSS, we can add JavaScript, we can add whatever we want. But plain HTML works like a charm as well. So in this case, we have a parent template defining a content block in this. Oh, yeah, you see it, right? A content block to be used by children templates. And these blocks will display the code from children templates. And then something that I like is this URL for function that we can use to point to JavaScript and CSS in a static directory, which is a comfortable and elegant way to point to our CSS libraries, for example, materialize CSS, which is what I used. So this is my parent file. It's just layout.html. And because you saw the login screen, obviously this is not the whole code, but a good way to explain how it works. You can see that login inherits from layout, and the renderer will load layout with whatever variations we add to our login file. So these variants will be defined within the blocks we set in layout. For example, in this case, we're using the head block. Boom. And then on the Python side, I mentioned that one of the things I like from Flask is the route decorator syntax, which is the friendliest and most beautiful thing. I love it because in here you can specify your routes and your methods if applicable, and then boom, write your logic. It is that easy. And the cool thing is, for someone who's not so familiar, if they wanted to pick up from your code, it is much easier and much organized to read. So, point for Flask, we're winning. But if you want to go through the nitty-gritty details, you can check how I built this. You can go to nextmod.dev/nightscouts. I don't know why it didn't pick up the new URL, but that's okay. Another example of Flask in action, if you want to go through it, and I won't give you the details because it's still work in progress, but I'm making a karaoke room using React, the video APIs from Vonage and Flask. And it's basically thinking of a pandemic. It picks songs from YouTube, and you can have multiple people select their songs and queue them and so on. It's still work in progress, but if you want to take a peek, that would be grand. In conclusion, Flask is an awesome option if you're starting your journey with Python, and if not, it's a great option as well. Definitely not limited to small projects only. Something I love. You can annotate at will to meet your needs. And then once you gain proficiency with Flask, moving to Django will be very easy. Or maybe you won't need to move at all. Eh? So, microframework. How much of a microframework? I say I would call Flask a mighty framework. Hence why I picked up Doctor Strange. Here are some resources. Obviously, if you don't want to screenshot them, this is the slides URL. There are some interesting things like a tutorial to do a Svelte app with a simple Flask backend. There's also something for Vue.js and Flask. Some resources, and a double URL there for a Flask tutorial. Anyway, I want to say thank you very much for everything, for this opportunity to speak to you in here. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I hope you enjoyed the other talks because they were amazing as well. And if you want to find me on Twitter, it's Catufa82. It means popcorn in Venezuelan Spanish because I'm originally from Venezuela. If not, superdie.dev. There's also a contact form. You can find me in there. And thank you for this opportunity. That's all, folks.
Thanks so much, Diana. Can we please give Diana a round of applause in the chat? If you do have questions, folks, like ask them on the chat. I actually had a couple questions. So you mentioned you like async. Have you played around with Sanic, which I believe is like async, but it's like with the Flask API?
Yes, and it's grand. It was something we needed for so long, you know. I have to say that I discovered it by accident. I was trying to automate the automation, trying to what was I using it for? I was trying to run Terraform, automate Terraform from a small web server that we had internally, and that's how I found it. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's very cool. So one of the things that like I find about Flask is like every time I start a Flask project, I have to import all the things that like make Flask into Django. Do you have any like any starters? Like, because I know in the Django community they have this like Django cookie cutter. Do you have anything like that, or that you know about in Flask?
That's actually a really good question. You know, I never used a starter, but you're giving me good ideas. I would definitely, probably there are. I'm sure there are. I'm sometimes a bit out of touch with those things because I've been siloing myself to specific projects lately, at least in the last 6 to 8 months. But definitely there should be, and I'm sure the repository with awesome Flask with all those resources that are listed in the resources slide have a link to some starters. I'm sure. Definitely.
I always find myself like taking my last project and it's like copying and pasting like the create application file, the ORM stuff. And it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, I should probably just make a cookie cutter myself. But yeah, I will definitely check that out. Do you have any like recommendations on like ORMs or sort of just like best practices? Because I know you said like Flask can use like all of these different types like Pony, SQL Alchemy. Are there like best practices that the community recommends?
Oh well, yeah, definitely. There's I could say so many things. I think it depends on what you want to do. I am, and my orientation has always been full on backend and infrastructure, and now that I've been working with full stack projects, I've learned to be more in touch with other sectors of the same ecosystem and learn about other tools like web development. Like, until 3 years ago, I wasn't doing any of this, Ali. It's been I was more like the API lady or the automation lady or the infrastructure person, but I was never acquainted as much with web development. And all I have to say is that we can't single ourselves out, even if we know or if we think that we're really good at a specialty. Signing ourselves is missing out on learning opportunities and on contributing with the community, and yeah, definitely the discovery of new tools that can make our day-to-day easier. So I would say don't single yourselves out like I did.
Yeah, no, that's definitely great advice. I think like a lot of folks in our community are mostly like, we have like, not to say mostly, we have a lot of career changers that have been using Python as a way to like get into web development or maybe make the transition like you're talking about from DevOps into web development. Yeah, but Flask was my first framework. I would say I use it more than I should because it's just the thing I know the most. So I really love class-based views, but I love those decorators as well. We did have a question come in. Can you suggest other Python API packages as well? And if you don't mind, one more time, sort of just like high-level overview of the pros and cons of Flask.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. My my mom was shouting. She said dinner was ready. Well, I don't know. It depends. Depends again on your needs. I don't like to go specifically for further API packages. I mean, I could definitely suggest another micro framework that would ease your process if you're into API development that is in the likes of Flask, and it's called Bottle. It's ice cream with different flavors. And pros and cons of Flask, yeah, they were reviewed a little bit ago, but I would say learning curve, good community, good documentation. Those are my top three.
Awesome. Yeah. I would say great documentation. That hello world example is like 3 lines of code. You have like a web server. It's like absolutely unbelievable. But before we do let you go, do you have any like words of wisdoms or calls to action for our community?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We need help with your contributions. I'm working with translations to the Python documentation, particularly in Spanish. But for those who want to contribute with projects, there are loads of things that you can chip in with, and they all range from beginner friendly to more complex contributions to the Python community. I'd say this is a grand time to occupy yourselves. I don't know, I'm going crazy with the fact that I can't travel and I can't go out. So keeping myself busy in a healthy way is keeping everything under control. That's my other coping mechanism apart from Netflix and eating a lot. Oh, yeah. And one thing I forgot. So I'm doing sit-ups. I'm not the most athletic person, but my best friend has cancer and she recently had surgery. She has an 18-month-old son. She's out of work and in a terrible situation in New York. So I'm doing sit-ups every day, 25 sit-ups, and I go live on Twitter at 10 a.m. Eastern time to drive attention to her GoFundMe page. And I'm not the most athletic person, actually. It's quite painful to watch me do it. Yesterday I did 22 out of 25. Today I managed to do a little over 25 with a lot of help and cursing. So if you want to watch this show of me trying to do sit-ups for charity, and you can chip in and help this lady out. She's a UX UI designer. She's also looking for work. Go to my Twitter, Katufa82, at 10 a.m. every morning Eastern time until we get to the goal of $5,000 to help her with this horrible situation.
Yeah, that sucks that's happening, but it's great that you're doing that. I will definitely be tuning in tomorrow morning. Make sure everybody follow Diana, and can we please give Diana another round of applause in the chat? That was a fantastic talk.
Thank you so much, Ali. I'm a big fan of yours.
Thanks so much, and thanks again for coming on our live stream. We'll see you around.
Bye-bye. All
right, so that was Diana Rodriguez talking about Flask and how much of a micro framework is it really? I mean, it's a macro framework that is a mighty framework, I believe is how she said it. A fantastic way of saying it. So we had a fantastic line of events. I'm just going to share my screen so we can talk about what's upcoming. I forgot to mention, if you're still around and you're having a good time, go down below and hit that like button. It really helps us out. We just passed 1,000 subscribers. So if you've not subscribed to our channel, subscribe. We're looking to get to 2,000. Hopefully it won't take as long as 1,000. So actually on Thursday, we have our algorithms and data structures special interest group event. we're going to be doing 2 or 3 leet code or hacker rank type problems just to help you practice those skills. And then next Thursday, which is August 13th, we have our August main meeting. And we have 2 fantastic speakers. We actually have 3 fantastic speakers. One of them is going to be Nina Zakharenko. She is one of the directors of the Python Software Foundation. She gave the closing keynote at PyCon US last year about the Adafruit, the device. The Circuit Express, I believe it's called. And then we also have Piper Thernstrom, who is the creator and maintainer of Pursuit by Bear, which is a Python games library. And she's going to be talking about the principles that drive PPB. And then our final speaker is going to be a ChiPy community member who recently moved away out to the West Coast, Sri Prasad. She's going to be talking about the California Consumer Privacy Act. That's something that affects a lot of us, especially if you're working for a web development shop. So looking forward to all 3 of those talks. What other announcements do we have? Today we released the ChiPy job board. We've been connecting employers and community members since our inception in 2003. Now we sort of have a formal, more of a standard platform you can go. If you go to our website, hit that jobs board button, which is outlined in the red, you'll be taken to this page. And if you have a job, please post it there. If you're looking for a job, hopefully you can find it there. And we recently revamped our mentorship program. Before, it used to be more of a structured, process-oriented mentorship. Now it's going to be more self-directed. So if you go to chipymentor.org, you can sign up for an account, fill out a profile of the things that you have, the things that you are good at and the things that you're trying to learn, and send some requests and hopefully find yourself a mentor or a mentee. That's it for us for this event. I'd like to thank all of our speakers, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you on Thursday and then again next week.